So, getting started, first I want to thank our panelists here tonight for lending us their time and expertise. We have people driving in from all over the state, so we really appreciate that. We would like to thank Anthony for providing us the photos that you're seeing. These are actually from the climb itself, and we really appreciate him providing us those photos. Next, I'd like to thank you, our audience, for trusting us with your time and helping contribute to a culture of safety and learning by being here tonight. And then last but not least, I would like to give a big thank you to Brian and the Mountaineers. For the past 16 years, Brian has served as a Mountaineers backcountry ski leader, and 19 years ago, Brian became one of the first SOA organizers. So he helped provide us this great room tonight and this space to be able to host this, which we really appreciate. So thank you so much, Brian and the Mountaineers. And my name, for people who don't know me, is Jack Fernandez. I am a member of the Seattle Outdoor Adventurers leadership team, and I'm going to be moderating our discussion tonight. And so before we jump into the panel itself, I just wanted to give everybody a quick rundown of the schedule that we've planned for you tonight. So first, I'm going to introduce each of our wonderful panelists. Then I'm going to give a quick summary of the climb and the events that happened. This will be pretty brief, just so we all have the basic facts. But if anybody is interested in a more detailed account, I believe that we have been passing out the official accident report. And if anybody didn't get one and wants one, we have some additional copies up on this chair here. They're also available on the Meetup event, and I'm sure you all can Google and find it as well. Then, after that, we will jump into what you're all here for, the panel discussion. We're going to hear first a talk from them, then I have a few questions prepared, and finally we will open it up to you all, our audience, for any questions that you have. So I hope you came prepared with some questions. So with that being said, let's meet our panel. First, we have our guest speaker, James Pearson, here in the middle. James is the Director of Operations at the American Alpine Institute, an AMGA certified single pitch instructor, an ARI avalanche instructor, a rope tech, rescue technician, and certified personal protective equipment competent person. A lot of titles, that is all to say, he is very knowledgeable about all of this.
Or a lot of hats.
Next, we have Rachel Roberts. Rachel has been climbing for 24 years, primarily glacier mountaineering and sport climbing, with some forays into trad and alpine climbing. She's been an SOA member since moving to Seattle in 2013, and a part of our leadership team for quite a while as well. Finally, I would like to introduce Paul Oriza. Paul, over there on the end, has been an SOA member since 2010, leading trad and ice climbing events, among others. He has 26 years of Special Forces mountaineering experience, with an emphasis on high angle and avalanche rescue, casualty stabilization, and backcountry rescue, evacuation, and survival. So let's hear it for our panelists. All right, so a brief background on the climb. I just want to give everyone a quick refresher. On May 10th, 2025, 4 climbers, Tim, Alex, Anthony, and Vishnu, set out to climb North Early Winter Spire via the 1,100-foot Early Winter Schoolbar route. And for anyone who doesn't have a copy of the accident report in front of them, here is a picture of the route. This route is a technical climb with 5 pitches of mixed snow, rock, and ice climbing. Before starting the climb, the team set a turnaround time of 5:30 p.m. and decided that they would descend the same way that they ascended. Starting at 6:10 a.m., the team climbed for about 11 hours, with the team deciding to turn around at the top of the couloir without completing the final rock pitch to the summit, based on factors including deteriorating weather and waning daylight. The team descended as a group of 4, using existing anchor points, as well as adding and sometimes leaving behind additional gear in order to build redundant anchors. On the third rappel, the first climber to descend was unable to find a place to build an anchor. 2 more climbers descended to help search for anchor placements. Eventually, a single piton was located. However, they did not find additional gear placements near the piton. All 4 climbers moved to the piton, and 2 attached via slings to the piton, and 2 were on the rope itself that was attached to the piton. A decision was made to rappel off of just that piton. As the first team member began to rappel, the piton pulled out of the rock, causing all the climbers to fall. Unfortunately, 3 of the climbers, Alex, Tim, and Vishnu, lost their lives in this fall. Anthony, despite sustaining serious injuries, losing consciousness for several hours, and losing his headlamp, managed to locate 2 of his deceased climbing partners before self-evacuating and driving to a payphone where he could call for help. James, I'm going to let you take it from here and give us some insights on what went wrong and how we can hopefully prevent this from happening in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. Everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. First of all, I'll say thank you to all you for having me here, and condolences to the friends and family that are no longer with us here. This has got to be a great tragedy for y'all as a community. This is a tough time to take that retrospective step back and try and figure out, okay, how do we prevent this from happening again in the future? So thanks for taking the time to be here. It's tough. With something like this, it's easy to kind of point that finger at that single piton, and then I would think, oh, well, what could be done here? Why did they do this? Why that? But I think a bigger and more productive way to look at this is starting, taking the steps back and trying to figure out, okay, how did they come to that decision? Why were they forced to make that decision? Start looking at things like, the timing, the route decision, the group makeup. There's all these other factors that really go into something like this. If anyone's picked up a copy of Accidents in North American Mountaineering, and you start reading through those, it's not every time, but a lot of the times, it's usually this cascading of decisions, a series of events that have maybe seem slightly innocuous individually, but they just build on one another after another until something finally fails, some link in the chain finally goes awry. And that seems to be kind of what the situation was here. They're going, the team had been climbing, things have been going good, but they decided to turn around. Weather was kind of changing, the folks were cold, they're trying to beat the dark. There's a lot of these little things start to, as we chain them together. Pressures slowly build sometimes. Even if it doesn't feel like, you might be under the pressure. It's there, you've got things like changing weather, darkness, things like that in this instance. It's interesting to try and look at this when we're in these somewhat stressful situations. Our brains, even though we don't realize it, are trying to make these shortcuts to be efficient. There's a thing called the Cognitive Bias Codex, which is this big indexing of all these different types of heuristics and shortcuts that our brains try to use. They basically kind of break it down into 4 main groups. I wrote this down because I knew I was going to forget them. What should we remember? What do we do when we have too much information? What do we do when we have not enough meaning in that information? and what we do when we need to act fast. A lot of times those things also like play together, even though they have them separately in this codex. There's a lot of times where you're juggling these different aspects to it all. And I don't know if you guys have ever, please jump in at any time here if you guys ever have any experience like this, especially with some of the military stuff. I'm sure you've had some issues like this when you've had to deal with variables and information and accessibility and things like that. But yeah, our brains try to make sense of it all, whether it's filling in the gaps that we might have of missing information, or smoothing over when we have too much information, trying to just distill down what's most pertinent, or how to make these decisions quickly. Our brains do funny things to justify an ends to a means. And it happens to all of us. I mean, I've justified things that I've done in the mountains before. Oh, I'm just gonna unrope here and scramble through this thing real quick. It's easy. I'm trusting my ability. I'm a better climber than my guests that I'm bringing up behind me. So I'm gonna, I got them on a rope, and I'm just gonna scramble up this thing and put a way for them. But I probably don't need a way. I'll be fine. Things like that are seemingly innocuous, but all it takes is one little thing to go sideways, and which we kind of have seen here with this, unfortunately. I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that. Your experiences?
Yeah. So for me, my experience is 90% of my existence was training. It's train, right? So that like when we do crevasse rescue as a team, like everybody knows all the jobs, right? So for us, at least luckily for us, is when I was in the military, is that everybody knows the positions and everybody's ready to do that one position, but knows collectively how everything's supposed to work, so that we can do the checks and balances. Like, all right, I don't think you should know one. Like, and you have to be, as a leader or a follower, you have to be able to call the leader out. Like, hey, maybe you shouldn't unrope or unclip your safety because of that. You should be able to do that. Yeah, absolutely. Everybody has a tendency to rush things, especially when chaos is happening, and want to do all the jobs all the time. You can't do that. So it's just kind of narrow that information that is completely overwhelming during chaos. You gotta like, what am I doing right now? And I talked to Rachel about that yesterday. Is a lot of times I stop myself and I start going, all right, step one, step two, step three. And I'd rather take that extra 10, 15 seconds to say, okay, what's happening? What am I doing? Than just continue blindly and do something. But I'm not that I'm not stepping into the things that I do. But that's kind of like a small check and balance within yourself, or be open to your partner calling out and be open to that.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think it's important when you go to events to have a decision-making process in mind for when you come to those points. So even if you don't have a clear leader on your team, you're just playing with your friends, how do you make decisions? How do you does everyone feel comfortable speaking up? I was actually on a climb with Alex exactly a year prior on Tacoma Glacier on Rainier, where I was going the wrong way and I was the leader, and eventually he was like, hey, we're going the wrong way. And I was like, oh, you're right. And so we turned around and went the right way. And if we hadn't spoken up, we would have climbed the Sunset Amphitheater, the Sunset Ridge instead. So just making sure that, and I realized that I think as a leader, I hadn't done enough on that trip to tell everyone else, you need to speak up if you think I'm doing something wrong. And so I think after that, everyone was more doing that more when speaking up, and I think it's important for everyone to sort of feel like they have agency in a group. And I'm not saying in this position they didn't, but just I think that's generally what you want to have in a group.
Yeah, I think a lot of it just boils down to good communication within your team. Coming into it honest with yourself about what you want out of an experience like this, whether it be a climb or a ski tour or whatever the case may be. Like, what do you want out of the day? Honest with your other teammates about where you're at, how much risk you're willing to take. Risk tolerance is a huge spectrum for people. If you get somebody who's like, oh yeah, I'm ready, I want to go skiing, I want to go hug some cliffs, and you're like, well, I'm just out for a leisurely tour a Sunday afternoon kind of thing. So being honest with your group about what you want out of something like that, and having the comfort and ability to speak up when you see something wrong and say something. And having that comfort in knowing that you can rely on your other teammates to do the same thing. It can be really tough if you have a group of people who, especially in this, even in this scenario, it sounded like there was, everybody had a good amount of experience in different realms, but kind of putting the group together, there was a mishmash of different levels of experience. And, you know, I don't know for, with these folks, but being able to, when I go out, like having the confidence in myself to be able to speak up and say something when something doesn't feel right, or you know, why are we doing this? Oh, okay, yeah, you can explain it to me in a rational sense, then we both can agree on it. Okay, at least there's a discussion that's being happening, and not just applying trust in everybody. You know, in this, if you read the expert report, there is a question of like the concept of the expert halo. For those of you that aren't familiar with that, that's the idea that there is someone in the group with a, whether it be a real or perceived, higher level experience than other people in the group, and the people with less experience feel either intimidated or not worthy, or they just don't even recognize that they should speak up when they see something out of the ordinary. If anyone's in the avalanche industry, has taken some area courses and things like that, there's a mnemonic that they just kind of started teaching and advocating for. It's called facets. Facets are a snow crystal formalization, but it stands for, F is for familiarity. The idea is that, oh, I've been to this area before. I've seen this 100 times. You know, bad's gonna happen here. I'm really familiar with it. So you get complacent, right? A is acceptance. That means that you're trying to be accepted as part of the group. I'm not going to speak up because I don't want them to think I'm not cool or I don't know what I'm talking about. C is consistency or commitment. Oh man, we've come this far. We got up this early. We've been going for hours. I don't want to be the one to like turn around. You know, express the desire to turn around now. This is the only weekend I've got. You know, I'm busy all these other weekends. I've got to make the most of this weekend, so I'm all in, right? E is expert halo. T is tracks and scarcity. Oh, I've seen someone else has gone this way. Well, it must be fine. Nothing happened to them, so it should be okay for me. Or kind of the opposite of that is like, oh, I gotta get out here first before anybody else gets out here. You know, that kind of mentality of trying to get the most bang for your buck. And then the final S is social facilitation. You know, this is where all the cool kids are going. You know, I'm trying to up my game, whatever the case may be. So that facets is kind of this mental checklist of ways to check yourself, check your ego in that avalanche world. And a lot of those are very applicable for, you know, any of the climbing that we're doing. A lot of these mental traps that we so easily can slide into. Like I said, you're out with your buddies. It's the only weekend you've got available. This is a climb you've been wanting to do for a long time. Things like that. These little tricks that your mind plays to you know, make it okay that you're doing this, that you're pushing it, or whatever the case may be. But in the end, a lot of it just boils down to good communication again with who your partners are and trusting them.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah,
So,
please.
speaking of airing the facets, so this is the airing, the avalanche book, and you can find these anywhere. So on the second page on the book, it has actual, it's primarily based for backcountry skiing, but a lot of these principles apply to really any outing. So, you know, choose the terrain, right? Travel wisely, observe, teamwork, and planning. And in that, it has other things like great communication, discuss the group goals, as we talked about already, experience, abilities, shared tasks and responsibilities. Something I talked about, like what is your job at this moment? Don't worry about what they're doing. Do your job and do it better or do it well. Travel together, decide together. Everybody has a voice out there because, like he was saying, if you're just going along for the ride and you don't want to fluff any feathers, because you want to be invited again. Well, you want to be invited again, and the only way to do that is to get down the mountain, right? So everybody decides, everybody builds a consensus. Are we all okay with this route? Are we all okay with that route? How do we feel? And you have to be honest with yourself. There's many times where I've turned around a climb because I didn't feel it. And people are probably going to follow me because they just assumed that I knew what I was doing. And, you know, it's just experience. I don't know what's going to happen right now, but I just don't just turn around and go back. And that's a goal that we discussed at the beginning of the climb. If this happens or anything, we're just going to stop, talk about it, and turn around. So to me, this is a really good guideline to decision making in mountains, and it's served me well so far.
Sorry. Okay, this is working. Oh, it's on the whole time. Okay, sorry about that. So yeah, I don't have a climate specific thing to add. I was just thinking of something from Gavin DeBecker's book, The Gift of Fear. And he talks about how intuition is essentially your brain processing faster than your frontal lobe can explain. So you can notice that something is wrong and it feels off. And all you can say is, well, it feels off, and it might take a while for your brain, for you to actually understand why something feels wrong. But you should listen to that and kind of pursue that and think about it. You know, if there's a gut feeling, there might be something to explore there.
Yeah, I think that's really good. It's like they call them gut feelings for like it's a proven thing. You know, it's over millennia as we've evolved as humans. Like we get these intuitions, like, spidey senses are going off. Let's take a second and evaluate what's going on here. I don't know if we want to like try and look through this more. Is there things that people have questions about? What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, I think, you know, perhaps, you know, the sequence leading up to the day of the climb.
Yeah.
You know, from day one, the inspiration, I want to climb this route, I want to climb this summit, and putting the team together, gathering the gear, that whole process, and then day one, you drive out there. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that, because I think some of the lack of planning or different types of planning could lead to you being in a position where you have to make that decision. So perhaps you can talk about that, all three of you. I think would be great for the group.
So, like the process of how do we decide to go or turn around? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I mean, when you select a route, you know, as a leader, you select a route.
Right, okay.
But you also want to be inclusive. You want to be democratic about the process.
So I think one thing that SOA, from my experience in SOA, we do very well is that we do a lot of, we used to do a lot of clinics. We do the self-arrest clinics, we do the route choosing clinics, we used to do gear clinics. Those are stepping stones. The Mountaineers does the same thing, where you have the little stepping stones to start building a little bit of experience and knowledge, and then eventually from those, you pick the people that you believe are up to, because you train with them and you see how they react, in stress and when they're angry and all the things that happen, right? And then you start choosing, okay, if I'm gonna do this level of, you know, type 2, who would I want to do this with, and why? So for me, like when I do a post-start climb, and like that, I think of the people, one, dependability, and two, are they open to speak to me when I'm doing something wrong, or are they okay with criticism, or saying, hey, how about you do it this way? You know, are we all collectively going to be open to working together? So I tend to do that. But if I am doing something on a higher end, that's kind of my thought process. And, so that starts way before I even decide that climb. I already have a pool of people that I want to take on that, because they're gonna, in my mind, they're gonna be there to help me if I'm being risky. You know, so like personality has a lot to do with it, and then also knowledge of the gear and personal experience with them.
Yeah, I would say there's kind of two different aspects. There's like, do you have the people you want to climb with, and then you're figuring out what is a good objective for the group, or do you have an objective in mind and you're trying to find people for the group. Because if I have a particular objective in mind and I don't have good partners among my group of friends, for example, just people aren't available or something like that, I will like start kind of recruiting for the climb. I'll try to find out people who have that knowledge. I might like post a meetup on SOA, but only let in people after I've talked to them and we have some sort of vetting process. But if I have, my friends that we're just trying to figure out, then I know their experience pretty well, and we're trying to figure out what is a good objective for the group, and is this something that everyone is comfortable with? And in that case, if it's not, we'll just pick a different objective, because the purpose is just to spend time together doing something fun. It's not necessarily to do a certain climb.
Yeah, coming at us from a guide, it's very different. People are coming in, like, they might have a goal in mind, but they're coming to us because they don't feel comfortable doing it themselves. And so there's, as a guide, you basically, with an Alpine Institute where I work, we do a lot of instructional courses. That's kind of, we consider ourselves a mountaineering instructional school first and foremost, and guides are just kind of second. But we still get people calling in, I want to go climb Baker, Forbidden Peak, whatever the case may be. And so it's taking them with where they're at. And as a guide, I think one of the biggest skills is having empathy and being able to connect with the people that you're taking the mountains and figuring out, okay, where are you at in like your journey, and bringing them to whatever the next level may be, whether it be that summit or that next set of skills. As a recreational climber, though, I think you guys hit it right on the head. You gotta either come at it as, okay, you're picking your group and then finding a objective that fits the group, or you've got an objective and you're finding the group to fit the objective. But whichever way you go, still having that sit down, that meeting, like, hey, this is where we're all at. This is what I'm comfortable with. This is the amount of risk I'm willing to take. This is what I want out of this experience. And having that heart-to-heart discussion with everybody to make sure that you're all on the same page, and that when the time comes, when something starts to get maybe a little uncomfortable, you can expect that there might be somebody speaking up here, and there won't be any big like, well, I didn't know, as long as you have that as a conversation before you even leave the house, that's going to help go a long way when the rubber hits the road out there and things start to get stressful. Like doing a walkthrough of the route. If you really get into the nitpicking of time planning and tour planning, like looking at the elevation gain, the distance, the handrails and waypoints along the way, that helps you start to envision what that route actually looks like, and people can build up an idea of what they can start to expect. And if everybody's on board with that, then you start looking at the gear, making sure people are familiar with the gear, know how to use it, know how to do the systems that are going to be employed, whether it be mixed climbing, using tube ropes, whatever the case may be, and doing that for the up and the down. A lot of people get focused on, okay, this is what we need to get there, and then forget that that's only halfway, right? You need to get back down. So sometimes you're going down the same way you went up, sometimes you're going down a different way. Make sure everyone's on the same page with that. And just having that sense of open communication, and making sure everyone's on the same page. And that's, I keep coming back to that, having that good communication within your team. Feeling comfortable that you're able to speak up if something is a little fishy, a little weird, like that good instinct starts kicking in.
So a question for you all. I know as a climber myself, I like to try and go out, kind of continually push myself to do harder things, right? I think a lot of people can relate to that. How do you go about differentiating between this is within my skill level, but harder than what I've done before, as well as this feels kind of hard and I feel unsure, but that's a good thing, right? I'm doing something new and I'm pushing myself, and differentiating that from, hey, something's off here. We really need to take a step back. Maybe we fail. How do you go about making those distinctions? Because I feel like a lot of times they can be pretty minute, but important?
I would say difficulty and risk are two different things. So, if you have a difficult climb, I mean, I did a sport climb today where I wasn't sure if I'd be able to finish it, but it's a sport climb, and like, you know, the worst that's gonna happen is I'm gonna fall and have to leave a quick plank behind. So, you know, the risk is relatively low. So, I think when you're pushing yourself, you want to generally do it in a more controlled environment, and if you're doing something that is, you know, at the edge of your skill level, you know, try to do it with someone who's more experienced, try to do it in a shorter dose. So, you know, if, you know, I know these guys have done mixed climbs before, so it's not saying that they do this, but, you know, don't do this as your first mixed climb. Like, do something relatively short with people who know what they're doing. I would not necessarily try to push my skill level on something like, you know, I want to go into a climb knowing that I can do it generally. I guess I'm a risk-averse sport climber, so maybe I'm not the best person to answer this.
So I actually use this analogy a lot. We have a series of courses at AI where people start learning skills and getting out on their own, and we encourage people, like, give them skills so they can become more self-sufficient. And I tell people, you all have a bubble, right? And you never want to push the bubble in all directions at the same time, okay? You want to push your technical difficulty, you know, push your grade, and then come back. You want to push your exposure. Maybe you're going to do something that's really remote out there, and you come back. You go do something that's maybe a longer trip, 4, 5, 6 days, and you come back. And you push in these different realms, these different aspects individually. And as you push those individually, your bubble slowly starts to expand. And as you're pushing and growing in these individual kind of areas, these factors, eventually your bubble will expand to encompass these things that you want to do. You're never going to go out and do the biggest, hardest, longest, gnarliest all at the same time, or your bubble's going to pop. But if you slowly expand in these different realms, you gain that experience on climbing really hard. You gain that experience on skiing that steep line. You gain the experience here, and then you can slowly start to put that together to encompass the things that you want to do as you grow as a climber, skier, whatever the case may be. So don't ever push that bubble all at once at the same time.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like the Mountaineers has certain levels, right? You have to pass this class, or you can go to this class, and then you go to the other class, and so on. And SOA, well, at least what I try to do, and most of the time, pretty much every time I've been with Michael, is every time we do something, it turns into a teachable moment. And we explain why are we facing the ticket this way versus facing the ticket that way? You know, why are we burying it this far? Why are we doing what we're doing before we continue? And those are all, to me, that's how you're slowly pushing your knowledge. And then once you gain that knowledge, you can start the next run. And then you do something, you learn something else. Maybe you can go, you know, backcountry skiing. You can go skiing back further. You learn a little bit of avalanche rescue or avalanche, you know, techniques, and then you push that a little bit further. It's all education. We do get some people in SOA that come in. They're like, hey, who wants to do blah blah from car to car? I'm like, where do you even know who you are? But they want to recruit a bunch of people to us, from us. And to me, it goes back to baby steps. Baby steps. Push your fitness. Push your risk level is going to increase the more experience you have. Most risks that you're going to want to take will become, which is kind of dangerous in itself, but it will, to a certain point, be pushed by the more experience that you get. You got to be humble and honest with yourself. You know, can I do car to car 3 times in a row for a regular product? Right? But like, be honest. Some people can do that. But just be honest with yourself. That's the hardest part. Is be honest with yourself and be willing to take it little by little.
I think you all brought up some interesting points around risk, and I think that's something that we could talk about for days. But specifically, what I'm interested in is how you go about weighing your different risks when you're out in the backcountry, because you do have objective risks, but risk is also a very subjective thing. And I've always been told that risk is probability times consequence, and that gives you your risk. But do you all have any frameworks that you use to decide those subjective things of, hey, what is the probability, what is the consequence, and how do you go about, even once you've calculated that, deciding which risks you're willing to accept and those that you aren't?
I don't have a lot of it is good, I think, but I do have a framework that I work within. So, when I'm in the mountains, what's above me, what's below me, what's the likelihood, what's the consequence? That's like a rough one, but really it's what's the high likelihood, what's the consequence, and what's the exposure. It's almost like a three-dimensional graph that I'm plotting the points into. I might have a really low consequence of a fall here, but if I'm subjecting myself to that over and over and over and over and over again, it's kind of a numbers game, and eventually something might happen, right? But if it's really low likelihood, pretty high consequence, and really low exposure, then it's a matter of okay, is that something I'm willing to take? And it's something I've got to be honest with myself and honest with my partners about. So looking at those types of things and risk is this huge spectrum depending on, and everybody falls differently in there. And just kind of being honest with yourself about what you're willing to go through and what you're willing to do, and also being honest that your risk tolerance will change over your life. You're young and ambitious and you want to go after it and bag those summits. Okay, your risk tolerance might be a lot higher. You're willing to take those chances. You get older, whatever, maybe you got family, kids, things start to change. That's the most common kind of trajectory that we see. Sometimes people go the other way, as they get older and bolder, they'll push it even more, they get more experience. It's all over the place. So being honest with yourself about where you're at, and not being afraid to draw that line when the time comes.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, one thing that I constantly try to do is check in with the people that I'm planning with. Like on Rainier, if you guys have ever done Rainier, eventually at some point you're just going to be looking at your feet, right? You're not going to be looking at the climber in front of you. You're not going to be looking at if they're limping. For me as a leader, I usually in the back so I can observe everybody. And there have been times that I've caught myself daydreaming on Rainier, and I'm not in charge, but I'm leading these people up the mountain. And I caught myself stupidly daydreaming because I was just tired and it was cold, and I was just step, a million steps, and I was what the hell am I doing? So then, checking in with yourself, and I do check in with everybody else, because it also keeps me, you look at me because I'm looking at you, so it keeps me, in check, if you will. And just talking to people, so mitigating risk. That's very, very, very subjective on how much risk you're willing to take. And it all has to do with, we've all been on all trails where all trails will tell you the description of a route you think is completely different, right? So again, how much risk are you willing
Notoriously
to take?
bad.
Yeah. So how much risk are you willing to take? And then to me, I look at who I'm with and the parameters of the things that we had already agreed on, time, do we have food, do we have shelter, do we have all these things in the route, does it look anything like it did on the map? So then what risk am I willing to take with the people that are with me? And then we communicate that, hey, this doesn't look like we thought it did, what do you guys think? How do you guys feel about continuing on? And then we continue on, and as a leader, you have to step aside and be able to look at everybody else that is depending on you and say, hey, how do you feel? You can't just get lost in your own thoughts. So it's a lot more responsibility, but those are the things that so I try to continuously talk to people, engage how they're feeling, how their breathing is, and they're also, so then I encourage them to look at me, and that's really my biggest risk factor, I guess, is how the people are doing within whatever outing we're doing, and then if one person doesn't feel it, we're all turning around.
Yeah, one thing I would just add to that is over the time I've been climbing, I have seen just people become more, which I think is a good thing, more tolerant of sort of people saying they're scared. When I first started climbing in Phoenix in the early 2000s, you better take that whipper and you better just go for it and like, don't be fancy. Which is not like, but now people are much more okay with, I think there's more of a cultural shift towards speaking up and saying, I'm not comfortable with this. And I think there has been growing respect for that, which I think is good. And it's something we should encourage in the community. I've definitely turned around on mountains and I feel totally comfortable with the decision. And then I come down and people are like, why are you summit? Where are you good stuff? It's a whole complex array of factors that you can't really always boil down to one thing. And so I think also just being nice to other people when they don't succeed is also very helpful as well.
Yeah, like humbleness, humility, and empathy, like with everyone in your group. I think that goes a long way. And even like you said, like 20 years ago, we probably wouldn't be having this discussion right now. Like the outdoor community as a whole has come a long way in taking situations like this and like embracing it and trying to figure out, okay, what can we learn versus, where do we point the finger? That's what we're really trying to do. That what can we learn from here and how can we be better? Hopefully something like this doesn't happen.
So, Rachel, to your point, that you brought up a really great point, I thought. That person that expresses that fear, for me as a leader, it actually opens my mind to risks that I haven't seen, potentially. And so I'm likely to listen to that person even more and empathize with that situation. And I think a good leader is the one that can take that feeling or that expression and really share it with the team. And it might give you an opportunity to solve the problem at that point or make a decision to turn back.
Yeah, we were talking earlier, there was an event here at the program center where they were doing some rappelling and one of the students pointed out and said, hey, this doesn't look right. And the instructor kind of just waved it off, dismissed it. And my response to that is that's not the best sign of an instructor, unfortunately. An instructor should be able to, or a leader should be able to take a concern like that, validate it, and either explain why here's X, Y, Z, that this is okay, and okay, let's work through it and figure out, build trust in the system, for whatever the case may be, or have the humility to be like, oh, thank you, okay, let's fix this, let's make this better, and then proceed on. So yeah, being open as a leader to, it's not really criticism, but just open to feedback and awareness of other people. As a guide, I'm focused on all kinds of different things, and I'll tell my people and my climbers, it's like, hey, if you see something, let me know, because I might be focused on this over here and completely unaware of what's going on over here with the rock fall or the ice fall or whatever the case may be, that I need to be aware of, but I'm so focused right here that I'm missing it. So if you see something, then say something. And just, again, having that open communication with who you're with, letting them know it's okay to speak up.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I agree with that. It keeps going back to that be able and willing to explain why you're doing something. Because there's why, you're already processed that as a leader, right? You're already processed, this is what I'm doing, and then be able to explain it to somebody when they ask you, why are you doing this? Like, if you're already making the decision, then just tell me so I understand. And like Michael said to me, that person is opening my eyes to some other hazard that I wasn't even aware, because I feel that I know what I'm doing, right? So then I can focus on this one thing, and then noticing something completely different that I'm completely oblivious to it, because I've done this a million times, right? And that happens to us a lot. I've done this a million times. I can walk up right here and come back, but I don't notice, like, maybe the crevasse was opening way over there, and I'm walking through it, and for some reason I'm back to daydreaming, and I'm walking through it, and you notice, like, hey, maybe we should go out a little bit further. Like, oh, crap, you're right. We should go out a little bit further, So 5 people on a rope, that's 10 sets of eyes, 10 minds making decisions, or 5 minds making decisions. So yeah, everybody can call everybody out, and we all know that there's ways to say, hey, I don't feel this, or like, hey, you there's ways to call it out and constructive ways to say, hey, I don't feel good about this, can you make it better?
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add to that is sometimes when you're on a route that's really well traveled, you can end up sort of thinking, well, this is fine, everyone goes this way. I was thinking, you're talking about when you're in DC route, super well traveled. The climbing rangers maintain that pretty well. There's there's ladders, there's all kinds of stuff. But people still do take crevasse falls.
There's that one person that creates the crevasse
Yeah.
opening. Somebody has to make that before they move the ride over, right? You don't want to be that person.
Yeah, and when Alex and I climbed a year ago, like right before we came through, a big part of the routing collapsed, and we had to set up like a running delay to get down some steep crap. But yeah, just because everyone else has done a climb, this is a problem in sport climbing because people be like, well, there's bolts, people climb here a lot, so obviously it's fine. But like, I was on a climb today that gets a lot of movement, and there was a bolt that moved, and you gotta just always be mindful of the risk, even if it didn't, even if the last person was fine, doesn't necessarily mean you'll be okay. You need to just think critically whenever you're out there, pretty much.
Yeah, I was climbing in an area, kind of on the East Coast, where the ethic is to lower off. You put the rope to the chains, you get lowered off. Everybody gets lowered off. Statistically speaking, lowering off the ledge is become a more safe practice. However, when I got to the anchors at the top, the rings on each bolt, there was a groove worn in with like millimeters of metal on both, like 2 grooves on both sides where people have lowered off, and then the ring is spun perfectly in line and lowered off. And I was like, there's no way I'm lowering off this thing right now. So I rigged my own rappel and did all in. But like, even though that's like what everybody else does, it's like, no, this is one of the times I just drew the line. So yeah.
I think that's an interesting point about when you have to make the call of, hey, we're not going to do this. I'm going to figure out another way. I'm going to go down. I'm going to figure out a different way to do it. So my question for you is, how can you prepare yourself in advance to bail well? So it sounds like, in that case, you had brought up extra equipment, even though it was a sport climb, in order to rig your own rappel. Can you talk us through kind of some of what the mental frameworks and the gear that you bring along in order to know that whatever happens, you can not only bail, you can bail well?
So for like alpine climbs, having some quick links, having some cordelette that you can, you don't mind cutting up and leaving behind, some webbing, something like that. Knowing the limitations of gear that you have, nylon slings are better for cutting and retying than a Dyneema sling. Retying a Dyneema sling isn't going to hold very well, it's too slippery. So like, having that knowledge and awareness of what your materials are, your gear can hold, things like that. But I think a lot of it goes into like just that pre-planning before you even leave the house, like being aware of, okay, this is where we're going up, this is where we're planning on coming down, what are my plans kind of A, B, and C. And this the familiarity, I think, with the tools in your toolbox, and always trying to add more tools to that toolbox. How do I do an improvised anchor with some rope so I don't have to leave stuff behind? If I do have to leave behind, how do I make a solid, redundant anchor? How do I, what's the best way to equalize these pieces? That's all just going to come from experience and pushing your knowledge, taking more seminars with your group, looking at outside resources. There's lots of ways to build that, but it's an incremental thing. There's no like one definitive resource for it. But if you're doing the prior planning beforehand about what you might get into, you're going to be much more well off than I'm just going to do this fine and whatever happens.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a build-up of continuous experience and continuous open-mindedness and learning from. I've learned a lot from mistakes that I've made in my my teammates have made during training, and a lot of times those are the most teachable moments. Because if I do something right, I'm kind of like, well, I got this, right? But if I do something wrong, I'm like, I have to learn from this and not do this because I might have to do this in the dark in a snowstorm on the side of the mountain. So I better be good at what I just messed up. And I think collectively, goes back to the clinics that we used to have, and we're still planning on having, is attend those clinics, learn the little steps that lead up to big steps that help, making improvised anchors. And one thing that, to me at least, and a lot of people that I met that draw alpine climbing and rock climbing, any of those things, and it's like the problem solving of it, right? Physical aspect is one thing, but like the mental aspect of like, I have a real problem in my hands, and I have to solve this, right? So collectively, how are we going to solve this? Are we going to make an anchor off a tree? Can we make an anchor off this tree? Can we make an anchor off that rock? We do that when we rock climb on the weekends. We start doing some improvised anchors, and then things like, what if you have to do an extended belay, right? If you have to go 120 meters on your ropes, and you have to leave your ropes there, do you know how to pass the knot through your belay joints? And you're going to be doing it on your own, so you have to be confident that you learn those on the ground. Extend, passing the belay or passing the knot. I rappelled into empty belays, and I reached the end of my rope, and while hanging on the rope, I had set up another rope and pass the belay and go down, and it was the worst setup of my life. I was there for like 20 minutes and I set up trying to do this while holding it. Like, it was ridiculous, but I did it because I had to learn. We purposely rappelled off a blind belay that we knew the rope was going to run out, and we had to do that. So it's all practice when you're safe, so that when it does come time to do it for real, you know how to do it.
I mean, I don't have a lot to add besides a climbing rescue class to be helpful. There's academics on those, just how to, those things like passing the knot, escaping the belay, those sorts of things can be helpful because once you're in the class terrain, it can be, it's a lot more serious if there is a problem. Obviously, that's why we're.
Unfortunately, a lot of those skills are perishable though too. So if you don't go out and practice with your friends, just be like, hey, we got an afternoon, let's go do some rope rescue stuff around this tree in the park or whatever the case may be. That's the nice thing about once you have the fundamental skills, you don't have to be whatever on cliff actually doing them to practice them. You can in the backyard, with a barbecue going and have a good afternoon about it. Just like, all right, we're just gonna do some 3-to-1 raising, we're gonna do some lowering systems, just kind of play around with it. But you still have to get those initial skills first before you can, have the time to play around with it. So yeah, go take the class, take a rock rescue class. It's one of those things that you hope you never have to use, but when you do have to, you're glad. Same thing with crevasse rescue, with avalanche rescue, any of these things that we're doing, swiftwater rescue, whatever the case may be, whatever is your flavor of that. Go take those classes, get those skills, and then keep practicing on them.
Mike and I were talking about, we are geographically located in one of the best places in the world to do these things. Like, we have a beacon park at Snoqualmie that I've taken people up there to do beacon training, how to rescue, and how to do basic avalanche rescue, how do we read, like, why avalanche theory, we kind of hit on there, we see what the avalanche, why causes avalanches, and we've done avalanche rescue, or we've done crevasse rescue at Marymoor Park of a picnic table in the rain. We just stretch out the ropes, and this is everybody's job. Everybody rotated. Now you do this job, and now you do this job. That's how you do those things. Whenever we plan Baker, when we plan Rainier, we start at the very basic. All right, we're going to start with knots, and then we're going to. This is the rope, and this is a dynamic rope, and this is a static rope, and all those things. Because when I teach, I'm also remembering myself. These are the basics. I have to go back to the basic and learn everything again to make sure that I'm keeping myself honest.
I will also add, just personally, I've put a few bolts in my garage so I can build anchors. Bolts are like, I don't know, $5-10 a piece, and it's probably been the best thing that I've done for my competency climbing, and that I can take 30 minutes in an afternoon and go rig whatever anchor I want. So I would highly recommend that. Also, if anyone anyone wants to use my garage, you're always welcome. Okay, I have one final question that I want to pitch to our panelists before I'm going to open it up to the audience. So, obviously, the catastrophic failure we saw in this scenario was the piton failing and pulling out. And I think there's been a lot of focus on that. So it's kind of a two-part question. I know we've touched on them slightly, but can you, one, speak to some of the other preceding events that kind of contributed to why they were in this situation? Because I think those don't give as much, or get as much attention as the piton. And then also, for people here who may not be alpine climbers, may not have ever seen or used a piton, can James, you maybe just talk to us a little bit about what exactly is a piton, why are they used, where will you find them, and maybe even a little bit about how they're different from a bolt and how you can test them.
Sure, yeah. So there's bolts, which are, you drill a hole in the rock, and there's kind of two basic families of bolts. There's a glue-in bolt, which actually uses an epoxy adhesive. You squirt that in the hole, you pound in the bolt, and it sets, and you've got an anchor there. Then you have a expansion bolt, which actually has a sleeve and an inner part. You drill the hole, you pound it in, and as you tighten the inner part, there's a little sleeve that expands. Kind of like you ever hanging a picture in drywall, there's a little sleeve in there that fills in the hole. Kind of similar thing. So that's the kind of fixed anchors. The piton that we're talking about here that the team used, the idea is that is like a knife-shaped piece of metal, usually kind of a malleable iron. It's got a little flex to it. They're hot forged usually, and the idea is that you find a crack and you're pounding it in with a hammer, maybe an actual hammer, or maybe it's the back side of an ice axe. It gets pounded into a crack that gets left there. They're usually used when there isn't a crack that's big enough for a cam or a nut or some other piece of removable protection. And there's different shapes and sizes to them. They're, like I said, most commonly it's kind of a knife blade shape. There's some that are more like U-shaped, things like that. But yeah, they get pounded in. And as you're hitting them with your hammer, they ring. And as you pound on them, they'll go from a dull ding, 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 and then it goes as it goes into the rock. There's less vibration, so the pitch increases. So it'll go ding, 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 as you're pounding it in. So
which means it's as the pitch goes
as
lower,
the pitch goes
it's
up,
soft.
get higher, it's more
It's
solid.
more solid.
Yeah, ideally. If it's not changing the pitch, that means it's still vibrating within the crack, which means it's not solidly placed in there. So in this situation that we're looking at here with the group, we don't know if the first climber down tested the piton, unfortunately. We'll never know. When they all got down, I think they were just happy to have found something. They got down there. There was the first person down repelled to one side, couldn't find anything. The second person repelled down, couldn't find anything. Third person repelled down to the other side of the gully, couldn't find anything. And then finally somebody came down, kind of moved past where everyone was at, finally found something. And at that time, everybody was just happy to have found something. The issue though is just relying on that one piece. There's a matter of redundancy that we try to employ in most of our anchors. And it's funny because I actually just got into a little bit of a Facebook spat with somebody about redundancy, as we do on Facebook, but I let it slide. but they were saying that, oh, you know, this, you're not using like 2 carabiners and things like that. So there is a level of diminishing returns with your redundancy. You know, you're not having redundant ropes through a system when you're rappelling. You know, you're still rappelling on one rope, even if there's 2 ropes tied together. If one of them fails, you don't have a backup in that regard. You know, we don't usually climb with 2 ropes going up unless there's a significant hazard that would deem it necessary to have some kind of redundancy in there. So we don't have redundancy in every situation, but usually in our anchors we try to have redundancy in case something fails. There's going to be some other way that the system is backed up. And unfortunately, in this circumstance, that wasn't really questioned. You know, they felt that one piece was good enough. You know, if there was a way that they could have put in something else and made that anchor more redundant, that would have, you know, we might not be here today. Who knows what the situation would have been. But if I was there, I would have been trying to hunt for anything to put, you know, anything else in that rock. And if they couldn't have, you know, maybe going back up the gully a little bit more. It sounds like that when they found that piton, they were at the very, very end of the rope. And so maybe if they would have went up the gully a little bit further, could have found something. You know, they had climbed up the gully that same way. They had placed some protection. They had built some anchors along the way on the way up. So there's obviously something, but due to whatever factors they had, whether it was the time pressure, the cold, or just complacency, there was not really discussion on why just one piton was enough. Unfortunately, that was the main root of the main kind of link in the chain that broke it all this. Individual pieces of your own protection, you give that a rating between 1 and 4, with the idea that eventually you're getting up to over 10 points. And so you're looking at, well, what's the quality of the rock itself? What's the, you know, is it, you know, friable, nasty? Is it dirty? Is it a bunch of dusty nastiness in here? Is this a crack in this boulder? Is it a crack in the face? Is it a crack in the mountain? Is it a crack in the world? You know, what is the nature of this, where I'm putting this piece right here? And then you're looking at this, actually the surface of the interior crack. Is it big crystals? Is it fine grained, you know, sandstone, things like that? Sharp edges, angular. How much contact am I getting with the piece on the surface? Is that just like 2 little crystals that are holding my nut in place? Or am I having full smooth contact with the entire piece? That's actually going to hold really well. Looking at the direction of the fall, it's going to come out, the anticipated fall or anticipated load. Kind of putting all of this together to kind of give an evaluation and a number score. And it's not a hard and fast rule, but it's a tool to help you evaluate the individual pieces and build a comprehensive picture of what that anchor really looks like. And then go from there. Yeah, that's what it is.
Great. Thank you all so much. Now we are going to take some audience questions, and I really want to encourage anybody who has questions to speak up and, you know, not be afraid to ask. And we've talked about, you know, not being afraid to speak up a little bit tonight. I know that decades of experience that we have accumulated here can be a little bit intimidating. It certainly is to me. But the point of tonight is to make all of you safer, and, you know, I'm talking to you, yes, every single one of you, every single one of your climbing partners. We want to make you safer. So whether you have your own decades of experience or you've never climbed before, if you have a question, we would love to hear it. But on that note, I do want to just quickly remind everybody that we are here to learn tonight and not to criticize. You know, these were people's brothers, fathers, friends. They were my friends. So, you know, please keep the questions about learning and be respectful. So with that said, if anybody has a question, please raise your hand and we will run you out a mic. Not all at once.
Thanks. I just have a question about the route, I guess, and whether or not the descent was standard descent now, or were they improvising that portion of the route because of the pressure that they're having?
So from the trip reports, something like that, it's not usually the descent report, usually the descent route. Usually the descent goes off the other side. I think Anthony was saying that the mindset was that since they were climbing up, they would have some familiarity with going down that way, and that's why they decided to go down that way. But yeah, and a lot of the guidebooks and stuff like that, it's a more commonly established descent down the other side. There's more established, more robust kind of anchors that are already there down the other side of the valley, because I think it gets climbed. It gets used as a descent for some of the summer rock routes as well.
And when you say the other side, the photo right here, can you point to it?
Well, yeah, basically off the other side of the pole.
Exactly.
Maybe go to the top.
There you go.
Yeah, so the other side is the other side of the range. And so if you do go down the other side, the carve is near the hairpin turn over there.
Yeah.
And if they descended the normal one, they would have had to, it's a pretty long walk around the range.
But it's the standard approach to the routes all along the reroute conquer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
None of that.
correct. Yeah.
So typically in these type of like up and over routes, and you guys are planning a trip, like how do you think about bail options and stuff like that? Like in terms of, if the descent route is typically on the other side and I have to bail mid route on the front side, how much do you plan for stuff like that?
I think that goes into like the initial planning process. Is like looking at, okay, what's the route up, and where are your decision making points? That's something that we definitely look at in avalanche industry. Is like you may need to get up to a point where you can even see what's going on, deciding whether to go or no go from there. So you have these observation points, you have these decision making points, and so building that into your mentality, your mindset from the get go, like okay, we're going to get to here and be able to make a decision. We're going to be able to get to here and make a decision. Just being aware of what those might be and having that overall overview of what's really going on. It's not any specific, I always have a decision point here. It just depends on what the mountain is giving you. But also having, they had a turnaround time, and they could figure out maybe that there was a turnaround location or something like that at that time. It kind of goes back to that thought about communication, good communication about where you're willing to push it, how far you're willing to go. But yeah, having those decision making points along the way here with them.
Yeah, I would say, to me, what it sounds like on this climb is that and I'm just speculating, their assumption was that if they can climb up it, they can come back down it. And I've had two bailouts in Colorado, and the Flatirons, and the storm came in, and everything just turned into oil, so it reaches the same when we went up. Because most of the Flatirons, you climb up and you just walk off the back and boulder. But this one, we just got caught in the middle of the rainstorm, so all the lighting just turned to snot, so we had to bail when we came up, and that's literally what we did. We knew, we just made a mental checkpoint, like we made an anchor here, we made an anchor there, so we're gonna repel to that, make an anchor, repel to that, make an anchor, repel to that. And I'm just assuming that was the plan, but somehow they missed the anchor points.
And also on this day, it was relatively warm, and had it been colder, they would have had more opportunities to make bead threads or use ice screws, or there just would have been more sort of anchor options using the ice and snow itself, which would have given them more options for bailing.
And sometimes bailing up is the desired route. Sometimes you've got to continue and finish out or go over or whatever the case may be. So being aware of what that kind of tipping point is on your route, where okay, it's going to be faster if we just push through whatever nastiness this may be or whatever the case may be. Having that awareness on the route can be important.
Yeah, that can happen too. That's happened on Rainier many times where we're going to Camp Muir and the particular just drops and you can't see anything, so we just camp on the trail. And then that's why our pass is 5 days long, right, permit. And then you just add 1 more day to your original 3-day climb. So you have 5 days. If you have the equipment, you have the food, you have the ability, you just camp out in the ice field. And then the next morning when the particular is gone, you just get up and keep going and you just add another day. And you made near a 2-day climb, which is fine. Yourself. But yeah, so just be prepared. It all comes at the beginning of the planning. We're gonna do a 3-day climb, but we have a permit for 5 days. So we can camp we're already gonna camp here anyways. Or the flats, we can just camp on the areas.
Yeah, and if you are doing an up and over on anything, you need to be prepared for conditions. I've done 2 up and overs on Rainier, and both times ended up spending at least 1 more night than planned. At one point things were really, really cold, but we were prepared. And we had enough fuel, we had clothes, we had extra food, because when you're doing a sort of up and over climbing camp, not that there is that, but like when you are in that position, it's very committing. And so you need to be able to kind of get through what comes at you.
And it also goes back to the thing about like not pushing the bubble all at the same time. So maybe your first up and over shouldn't be Rainier. It should be something else, a little less committing, a little less serious. So, again, ease out these different aspects, these different venues. And then you can go to your period or Rainier.
Yeah, and the first one, the reason why we didn't descend the route itself is we're doing cows, and it was my husband got altitude sickness above the ice cliffs and didn't feel comfortable descending the ice cliffs later in the day when there was risk of ice fall. And we knew that the route from, even though it would mean going higher, that the route from where we were to the supplement we knew was a fairly easy climb for us. And so we just got up there, and then we ended up camping on top of the cleaver. But if you can get down in that situation, go down the way you came. Like, you don't want to be spending an extra night up there.
Be comfortable, carrying that extra weight. It's not just a matter of doing an up and over. It's being familiar with the gear, being familiar or comfortable with camping in an inhospitable situation, being able to camp in nasty weather, being familiar with, everything you got in your pack, carrying that weight for that extended amount of time. All these little aspects. It's not just a matter of up and over, or not just a matter of this, or not just a matter of that. You got to look at it from a really holistic perspective about, okay, what does this task that I'm imposing for myself really entail? And do I have the experiences from other things to really prepare me for this honestly?
Do we have any other questions? Please raise your hand if so.
I was just curious, how much of an option was it to have fewer people on a particular peloton? Or
I think in this instance, the other option would have been just people would have just been standing there in the snow, which, of course, in hindsight would have been a better option. I think if you were ever in a situation like this when you had were relying on one, one failure point, one link in the chain. But yeah, you have to think about, okay, if something happens here, what happens to the rest of us? And most times, especially in rock climbing, you don't have that one anchor point. You have some redundancy. So there's that. It's familiar, have everybody equipped in, right? And I can only assume that was the same idea here. It's like, oh, well, this is our anchor. We should all clip in because this is what we always do. This is the safe thing. This is the best thing for us right now. Yeah, it's hard to kind of armchair quarterback that, but you're right. Yeah, ideally they wouldn't have been all put in the same, just single piece like that, and it would be a very different discussion.
I came late, so maybe I missed some discussion, but I'm wondering the fourth person survived and how that happened, like in the same everybody was example, and how the one person was able to make, do you guys any idea? And also, I can't even imagine, but is there any kind of like a self-rescue and is possible situations like that?
So yeah, we're lucky to have Anthony here with us. Yeah, we were talking about this kind of before the presentation here about like, hey, what made him special in this situation? They were all grouped together on a ledge while one person was rappelling down, but he was right there beside everybody else, and they got pulled off. And the only thing that he could think of was that he had a few seconds that he was able to attempt some kind of self-rest with his ice tool. He said that his helmet has a few cracks on it here and there. But unfortunately, with the other folks, there was much more injury with everyone else. And so the thing that we were postulating is like, okay, maybe in his attempt to self-arrest, that aligned his body more vertically with the couloir, and he slid down more instead of tumbling down more. We don't know. There's so many factors in there, but that's what I'm trying to piece together in my brain. That's just complete speculation.
Yeah,
we don't have any kind of evidence to anyway one way or another.
Possibly bracing for the fall. He had that extra second to brace for the fall, and he could actually prepare for it where the other guys just fell. Right? How like when you do your self-arrest and you fall on your backpack, you don't know which way you're going. Luckily, he was able to.
Thank you. So I know that the decision framework that they were in when they were building the summit, that they decided that they want, that was pre-planned. They wanted to go back the same way. Sometimes changing plans could be for a good reason. Potentially, I think one of the things that may have weighed on their mind is we don't want to climb the dark. And Holly and I talked about this earlier today. Should we practice climbing down in the dark, in ice, and on rock? I know I led a climb last year, Alex, you were with me and several people here. We had to climb down, steep slope, ice plus rock. And it teaches us a different way of looking at the hazard and how to deal with it. So can you speak to that? Because I think that is a totally different experience for a lot of people who are really trying to push that bubble further, from all your perspectives.
I definitely think we don't practice down climbing in general enough. That's something that gets done a lot, that kind of gets glossed over. So yeah, whenever even if you go to the rock gym, when you're on top rope, climb up, climb back down, climb up, climb back down. Not only is it good practice mentally, it's also good exercise. But climbing in the dark, I never really thought it would be an interesting exercise to figure out a way to like, again, with like pushing that bubble, you know, you don't want to be out in a remote area in the dark, like doing this. So how do you reduce those other hazard factors so that you can just focus on the darkness? I know I have this.
You camp at Vantage and just.
Yeah, that's true.
That'd
be great,
We were
yeah.
talking about camping at Vantage and do the rock climbs during the day with the fixed line as well, so we can traverse the rocks and then do it at night. But if you guys have ever done any Baker, Adams, and you're perfectly fine with an alpine start, right? That's in the dark. But then why is it that when the sun goes down in the evening, you're in a rush to get to your car? You're already climbing in the dark before. It's the same principle. You're just at the opposite end of the day.
I would say the problem with trying to find anchors is magnified in the dark. So, I mean, if you're wrapping and you're trying to look for the next anchor spot, it's gonna be even harder in the dark.
Yeah, but to me, my mentality is, it goes back to the military training, is that we're gonna do everything 100 times in training in a safe environment. We're gonna, increase the pucker factor little by little. Although the line is a little steeper in the military, but yeah, we're gonna start doing things in the daytime, and then we're gonna go do knots at night, and then do knots with gloves, and just keep adding to it, and then eventually we can just function at night just as well as almost as well as we can function in the daytime. We have AMFs, you can take your time, you have people there checking you, you have people backing you up. Again, we're okay with an alpine start. If you've ever done DC, if you've done a late winter climb for Rainier, you're gonna do DC direct. That's ice climbing in the dark, right? So why can't you do it at 5 a.m.?
I think the only factor that comes in on the return is that there's fatigue. So you have to take that really into consideration in terms of the dynamic of the team.
And kind of on that note, Michael, I wanted to add a little perspective, but I think a lot of it comes down to giving yourself options. Like, right, the reason that we carry headlamps is so that we have the option to do things in the dark. But I think it's also important to call out that sometimes, as we talk a little bit about, the option that you may want to go with is, hey, we're just going to bivvy here tonight, right? Like, we don't have to climb down in the dark, and we also don't have to get down before dark. The third option in this scenario is we wait until that daylight, and then we're rested from the fatigue, right? We aren't doing it in the dark, and so kind of any ways that we can find to give ourselves more options is generally a good thing.
Absolutely.
Any other questions from the audience? These have been some good ones.
Yes, I think if we can point out how to do a mental state, like a kind of panic. Because if I know so many people, they were yesterday discussing this issue, they would all point to right away, say, oh, something else, not take that. Something like, because at that time, the condition, every, the other aspect, make it like, panic. So the way you think is definitely not normal. It's like something, you want me like, wrong judgment of that at that typical time you do. So what my question is, how do you apply it?
I think it's a matter of like,
Can you repeat the question?
yeah, so I think the question is like, how do you deal with the panic or the urgency or when you're in those stressful situations? That was very good. And I think it's a matter of it, again, kind of being that humble humility of knowing yourself and like, okay, this is stressful, and being aware of that and being able to take a step back and like, when that stress comes in, it's easy to get the blinders off, right? You're focused on this is right here, right now. This is what's going on. But if you could stop, take a deep breath, like you're saying, and like and take that step back. Just giving yourself a moment to like, okay, fall back on the training. Okay, this is what I learned. This is why I'm doing this. This is how we've done it before. Getting consensus within the group. You know, the old saying is slow is smooth, smooth is fast, right? So slowing down when the intensity starts to ramp up, because it's as that ramping up, and like I said, with some of the cognitive bias stuff, you feel that pressure to like cut the corners, take the shortcuts, and some's usually when you get in trouble. So you take a moment, slow down, figure out, okay, is this really the only option? Is this what we have to do? Like, again, communication within the group, whatever the case may be. I think that's the key to all of that, is just managing and realizing that, okay, this is stressful, let's purposely slow down.
Yeah, and I would say, like having some sort of mindfulness practice in your daily life. You know, you don't want to wait until you're in a scary situation to figure out how to calm down. So, developing breathing practices or visualization exercises or something that you do to calm down just generally in your life before you're in a situation where you have to. And also understand that, like, sometimes when you're about to panic, like, there is a bit of a choice, and you can sit back and say, okay, take some deep breaths. Like, I'm not falling right now. I am, like, I might not feel super comfortable where I am, but like, I'm alive. I'm thinking, like, I'm conscious right here, and what can I do to move, to make this safer, and taking those deep breaths there. And sometimes you have to just, you have to calm yourself down.
Yeah, that comes to me, for me, it comes with experience as well, right? I was lucky enough to be put in a lot of very stressful situations where I had to minimize the noise and focus on what I'm doing, right? Things can be like mass casualties, so doing a mass casualty for say an helicopter crashes, we have to rescue them. So that training is, there's body parts, there's things, there's like focus on what I'm doing, what is my job here, right? Not getting pigeonholed, which is what, like, I know things are going on, but what is my priority? And taking that step, like, all right, whether I'm an anchor or whatever I'm doing, like, all right, I did the day, stop, okay, is it solid? Is it this? Is it this? Is it this? Is it this? Yes, okay, then I can tie in and do my rappel, whatever it is that I'm doing, right? So, but that comes with practice over and over and over, where you find your most safe second or two to take a break and like, okay, what's happening? Take it all in, and what is my priority at this moment? But that just comes with experience.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of it with also like just situational awareness as well, which again, kind of an experience. Like, if you can get comfortable and if you can be in a good physical conditioning, right? If you got good fitness, that's one less thing that you have to worry about on your climb. So you're not worrying about your fitness. If you're comfortable with your gear, that's one less thing that you have to worry about. If you've had experience in a steep terrain, that's one less thing. So like, the more of these, again, going back to that bubble analogy, if you can push in these different kind of venues and directions, you gain experience in these different things, so that when they all start to kind of coalesce together at once, you're like, hey, I've been here before. I know what this feels like. I've been here before. I know what this feels like. It gives you enough capacity to have that broader situational awareness, so that you can really focus on, okay, what's really important right now. Okay, I don't need to worry about this. I don't need to worry about this. This is what I need to worry about.
This may not work for everyone, but if you want a concrete example of kind of one of the things you may be able to try to deal with that panic, I can tell you what works for me. I really like mantras, and so call me crazy, but when I'm climbing, I talk to myself a lot. And one of my favorite ones is panic helps nothing. So I say that to myself a lot, and that really helps. helps me when I start to get into these situations, and I just keep thinking that to myself, right? If I panicked, I've suddenly made whatever situation is stressing me out 100 times worse. So that's something that really helps ground me back to, kind of focusing in on what do I actually need to be doing, rather than thinking about the 10 million things that I think might go wrong in this scenario.
Well, one of the things, this is more of like a comment, but maybe one that you might be able to elaborate on. But I remember reading this one book called Deep Survival by Lawrence Gonzalez. And he talks about building a mental map, kind of as you go, like being observant of your surroundings. Like you talk about people in tribes, they would often like look around them, they would look at features, they would discuss those features, they would look behind them and stuff like that. And I think that, it's kind of helpful to do that, especially on more technical climbs. I mean, especially when we're relying more on GPS for navigation and not really like, I guess you're saying like kind of have the blinders on going up, but just kind of building a mental map. So it's like you kind of have a familiarity of your surroundings when you do get into situations where you need to know your surroundings. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, for sure. It's so easy just to follow the blue dot these days. You're just like, okay, this is where I need to go, whatever. But yeah, I try to take a moment, like as I'm going up, to look around, especially in more technical climbing and scrambling, you get focused on, okay, where's my next hold, where's my next hold, where's my next hold? And even then, especially in alpine climbing, where there's less definition in our routes sometimes, there could be, I'm so focused on this really nasty whatever right here, but if I just would have like stepped back and like, oh, here's a much easier way to go, right? Looking back, as you're hiking, so you've got mental cues on the hike out, things you should be looking for on the way down. I think you're spot on. That's all really good stuff to have in your toolbox and start practicing.
If you've ever done a running belay, you're doing that. You're looking for ways to wrap the rope as you're climbing up, if you're scrambling, right? Running belay, you're always looking for how to wrap this rock, or this rope around the rock and make it zigzag so that it can arrest us. So you're constantly doing that already. It's really easy to just look at the dot or look at your feet, or daydream about what size a burger is going to be when you get back down to level, right? I do that a lot. I'm like, no, I'm climbing, I don't get the burger until I finish this climb. So, a lot of us do that, we just don't realize that we're already navigating the area. Looking at this one particular tree, what's different than the other trees. We just probably not conscious of what we're already doing most of the time.
Yeah, for the example of this climb, if you're doing some sort of thing where you're planning on descending your route and there are fixed anchors, like looking for good anchor points along the way up, trying to identify how far apart they are, and then trying to figure out how you can kind of remember where those are on the way down, can also help. My husband is incapable of building a mental map and looking at together anymore.
I think that building a mental map is great, but for people like your husband and me who are not particularly good at that, something that I like to do and that you can do in advance is I like to build a physical map for myself. So it's really easy to just import a GPX, track into whatever you use, and follow that blue dot. You can see actually this screenshot here, it's from the Search and Rescue Special Edition. But this is an app called CalTopo, and they have a free version. And so it allows you to do things like exactly what you see here, where you can add custom points. And so before I go out on a particularly committing climb, I will always build myself a map. So I've kind of pre-created that mental map by going through the exercise of drawing out my route. I'll mark water sources, I will mark defining features of that route, I will map out alternative bail options. And so you can really go through some of that exercise of a mental map, actually get in advance. So when you do get to the route, you kind of already have a sense of, oh yeah, I know, I'm going the right way because, yeah, that weird shaped rock that I marked is right there. I can see it, and I can see it on my map, and that's at least really helpful for me.
And I have a question. So let's say you're a climb leader. You have a small team or a big team, and you're in a panic situation. What do you do as a leader for yourself and for your team to deal with that situation in the most responsible way so you can bail out safely, so you can solve problems and move on? What are the responsibilities? Your responsibilities as a leader, but also not just toward yourself, but also toward your team. Can you talk a little bit about this? I mean, most of us here probably have never been in that situation. So, and you hope you will never be in that situation. But if you are, what are some of the methodologies or the frameworks that you will follow in your mind, back of your mind, that you use and you apply as a leader?
When you say like if I was in personally a panic situation, or someone on my team was?
You and your team. You got in a situation and now there's panic in your team. There's a situation that you have to deal with.
I think for me the first step would be assess the overall hazard. Like, is there an immediate hazard, right? And make sure that there's no immediate danger, right? Make sure everyone's secure, safe, stable where they're at right now, and then slowly start to pull apart and tease out. Okay, what is the real root of the concern, the hazard, the panic, right? And then start to work through and establishing the trust again in whatever the system. I think for climbers, it's usually a concern about the system. I'm not going to rappel off of this thing. I'm not going to, whatever the case may be. I can't trust my feet. I can't trust the rock. And so reinforcing, okay, you're on belay right now. You're okay. I've got you here. Here's why you're not going to fall. Things like that. Where, establish that bond of trust in the overall system of the climb or whatever the case may be. I think that's how you gotta do it. You gotta tease out what the real root of it, because people will, it's again those mental games that we play in ourselves about. They get caught up in one thing, but that might not actually be the real problem. Having a good team, some good co-leaders. My first lead as a true climb leader of the Mountaineers, I had a couple of mentors, people who brought me up and taught me everything. They were my road leaders before Guy Peak, and I had a woman on there. I was on the leading up the next pitch, and I just hear this meltdown. And luckily, I had a good team of co-leaders that could coax her down, calm her down, and get her to a secure spot, so that I could come back down. And by the time I had done that, they were already got her calmed down, got some food, got some water, taking a break, and everything was going to smooth over before I even really had gotten there as a leader. So, having a good team with you can go a long way.
Sometimes that person just needs to have a job and focus on that one thing versus trying to focus on we're on this avalanche course that we're all gonna die. Why don't you just look at this anchor and you handle the anchor? I'll do whatever, he'll do whatever, she'll do whatever. Sometimes it takes just that small direction, hey, don't worry about that, worry about this. Your whole job is anchor. And sometimes that seems to help. And if it's me, the one that's internally freaking out, I'll say, hey, yeah, this is what I'm seeing, what do you think? You know, and again, it goes back to being humble, like, I'm kind of right now mentally overloaded, what do you think, what do you see? And this is what I'm thinking, you know, am I right, am I wrong? Am I completely, you know, way left field, like, what do you think? And sometimes that different perspective, they calm you down, or you might just say, yeah, I see the same thing, let's get out of here, let's devise a plan to get out of here, how do we get out of here? You know, but it's being open to maybe I am the one freaking out, and I need somebody else's perspective.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much what they said, I would just say when you are with someone who's lower skill level and they're freaking out, trying to the extent possible, again, it's a place where they're safe, you can take a break, get some water, food if possible. I mean, obviously, depending on the situation, that might not be practical, but trying to get someone to a situation where they are relatively safe. I'd say when I am panicking, I tend not to lead climbs where there's people with substantially lower skill level than myself, like, because I'm not super confident in my ability to take care of other people. But when I was, you know, if people are panicking or people are concerned, like, I want everyone to be able to talk about the concern, because I think this goes back to, Michael, what you were saying earlier about if someone has a concern or they're afraid, they might be bringing up a risk that other people aren't really being inclined to. And so I think it's important to listen to that, because they could be freaking out about something that's like completely valid and something everyone should address immediately.
I'd like to add that also I think being physically just present with people can be really helpful when they're panicking, because sometimes it is a very, you know, valid, hey, this is actually a big risk, and sometimes it's not at all. And so it's funny to me, James, that you mentioned Guy Peaks. That reminded me of this winter we were climbing Guy Peak, and to get into one of the gullies, it's like a little bit of a bushwhack where you can get into the gully, and so one of the climbers on our team had gone up, and they were kind of bushwhacking a little bit through this tree, and you know, kind of going around it, but one of the branches had snagged through the loop of their backpack. But their backpack's behind them, so they can't see, they don't know what's happening. They're like, oh my god, I'm stuck, I can't go anywhere, I don't know what's happening. And they're starting to, you know, get in this panic state a little bit. And so just moving up to be physically present with them and say, hey, you know, just like, it's scary, right, when you're all alone and you can't really tell what's happening, but part of, you know, having a team with you, and just going and being physically present and say, hey, the area you're in, it's not actually that you're in a massive amount of danger, it's just a branch, we can deal with this. So sometimes just that, you know, not being alone, I think can be really helpful. And on that note, we are at 8 o'clock, which I think is our officially listed end time. So if anybody has one last question that they want to get out, we can do one more, and then we will let everybody go. And if nobody else has any, then we can call it the end. Going once, going twice. All right, well, in that case then, thank you so much everyone for joining us.